This is part 2 on a little mini series of videos I've been doing on my first aid kit. All this is part of a larger series I've been doing on what's kind of in my overnight or day trip pack for hunting. But in this video, I wanted to kind of go through a little more depth on my first aid kit, go through each piece, why I carry it, kind of my thought process on what's in my first aid kit and on backcountry hunting and really just backcountry first aid and emergencies in general. So the first thing that I want to establish is I'm not an expert on this. I do have some background in the medical field. I have been a nurse for about 4.5 years now, about 6 months in the ER. Other 4 years were on various other hospital floors. So a little bit of knowledge base, done some wilderness first aid courses and things like that as well. So getting that out of the way, I'm not an expert. If you want an expert opinion, there's some guys that have been, trauma medics, things like that. You can go find those videos. This is not a suggestion of what you should have. This is what I have, maybe some food for thought. Do your own research, make your own decisions, and then look to, actual training for your training. Real hands-on training is hard to replace. So go get that training somewhere. So my kit, the other thing that I wanted to say is that my whole philosophy on backcountry first aid for me is I either want to make myself more comfortable while I'm out there or survive long enough to either self-rescue or for rescue to get to me. Anything in the middle, I'm not worried about. So if it's something that I would leave the field for, but is not going to kill me, then I'm not worried about treating it. That's stuff like a sprained ankle, minor fractures, things like that. I'm not too worried about because either I can self-rescue or help can get to me before, there's any danger of like death or anything like that. One huge part of that system though is this guy right here, or a Garmin InReach preferably. Granted, I do have a Garmin InReach. I looked all over, I couldn't find it, so it's not in the video. But not just any phone, but a phone with satellite connectivity. You're seeing it appear in more and more phones now. Everything from the iPhone 14 forward has satellite connectivity now. So you can both text via satellite if you're out of service, and you can send an SOS via satellite on newer iPhones. I think some of that capability is coming to some other brands of phone as well. I film here on my iPhone 15 Pro Max. It's got the satellite features so I can text and stuff if there's no service. Granted, a lot of areas now have great service. Even when I'm 3, 4, 5 miles from a road, I've got service most places that I'm hunting now. Ultimately, the best thing, at least for the time being, is going to be a Garmin InReach though. The durability is better than an iPhone. The battery life is better than an iPhone, and the satellite network is better than an iPhone. So that's your best bet. But an iPhone with satellite connectivity is going to be a great option for you as well. But one of those two is probably the most important thing you can have, because there's a lot of situations that you can get yourself into where really the only chance of survival is going to be getting help as fast as possible. You're not going to be able to carry reasonably anything that will allow you to treat yourself and get help long term without some way to contact for help. Unless you've got a 30-pound backpack and a buddy that can carry you, you're going to have a hard time saving yourself in some situations. But number one thing is some way to contact people. All right, going into my first aid kit here. So first things first, you'll see that my first aid kit is really fancy in that it's in a plastic Ziploc bag. I've got all kinds of cooler pouches that I've used in the past. This is a Kafaru pullout. This is a Zimmer belt zipper pouch. And then I've also had my first aid kit just in a drawstring pouch a lot too. Each of these has pros and cons, but to me, the best thing is just a good durable Ziploc bag. One thing you want to keep in mind is that you want your first aid kit to be extremely quick access. And the one problem with your drawstring pouches is that if you're cold, you're hypothermic, you're in shock, anything like that, a little cord lock is very hard to operate with really cold hands or, when you've got other stuff going on. So that's why I've kind of gotten away from drawstring pouches. Then, you know, you move on to options like a zipper pouch here. Zipper's a whole lot easier to operate, but here you can't see into your pouch well. And I wanted to have something where I could see in easily, I could quickly identify the contents. Of course, you could put a first aid sticker or whatever on the front of this, but you're still not gonna be able to see inside of it. This is water resistant though, which is nice. Then you've got something like this Kafaru mesh pullout. Here, easy access, you can see inside, but it's fairly heavy and there's no like water resistancy here, which is why finally, you know, after using all kinds of fancy Molly pouches, those that I just listed, drawstring bags, all that kind of stuff, I've settled on just using a cheap Ziploc bag. Of course, I've written first aid on the front here with a cross. The reason for the Ziploc bag is 3 parts. Number 1, it's really easy access. Anyone can operate a Ziploc bag extremely quickly. If for some reason you can't, you can just rip it open. There's no issues there. Number 2 is you can look and immediately identify what's in here. So even if I can't get to my first aid kit, but my buddy can, he's gonna be able to see this, know what's in it, find what he needs quickly. And time is of the essence when it comes to an emergency situation. Number 3 is that it is watertight. So granted, everything in here is individually wrapped, so I'm not worried about any of it getting wet, but at least this adds some additional security from water, dirt, or anything like that. So ultimately, that's why I've settled on just using a Ziploc bag. The other nice thing about a Ziploc bag is it's very lightweight. I think I mentioned in my last video, I'm a very weight conscious guy. You'll see that with all of my gear list. I definitely live on that ultralight fringe. And this entire kit here is about 7.5 ounces. I was just working on editing this video and I remembered something else that I meant to mention but had forgotten to. And that is on the topic of quick access. Not only do I keep my first aid kit in this plastic bag so I can get quick access to it, but I also color coordinate some zipper pulls to my first aid kit. In every pack that I use, I keep my first aid kit in one spot where I always know where it is, and I try to, when possible, color coordinate that pocket. So, for example, on this pack, on this left side of the pack, I've got 2 orange zipper pulls, and that's where I keep this first aid kit. That way, whether it's me or someone else, if I'm trying to find my first aid kit quickly, or I'm trying to tell someone else where my first aid kit is, I can tell them exactly where it is. This is an EXO K4 2200, and I've used this left side pocket. I've also got some Kuyu packs and an older EXO pack, and on all of them I try to have some indication of where that kit is so I can get to it as quick as possible. Again, time is of the essence when it comes to a bleed, trauma, shock, whatever that is. So diving into it now, right on top is my tourniquet. This is a cat tourniquet. That's what I would recommend. If you're gonna pick one up, I would pick it up directly from North American Rescue. That way you can be sure you're getting an authentic one and not a fake. Other thing is I would get it in orange if I had it to do over again. As you'll see here on top, the windlass cover here, I have already pulled back. That way I can deploy it as quickly as possible. All I've got to do is loop this around a limb, cinch it down, and crank on this. There's nothing additional I have to do. The quicker access and the more ready you can keep your tourniquet, the quicker you're going to be able to apply it. Ultimately, if you get a puncture wound or a gunshot wound, which is the 2 things I would be most worried about in the backcountry, a tourniquet's going to be probably the best thing you can possibly have. Next up in here is some S-rolled gauze. So this is for packing a wound, also to stop bleeding. Both a gunshot wound or a puncture wound. You're going to pack it with this in addition to some of our other stuff to try to cause coagulation and ultimately stop that bleeding. That would be typically used in addition to some Celox I've got here. This is a hemostatic agent, so it's very similar to Quick Clot. Alternatively to these 2 things, probably the better option would be a Quick Clot combat gauze or something like that. But this is, you know, very comparable. Next thing is a couple of ABD pads. So these are just large absorbent pads. These are 5x9s. Again, you're using these to apply pressure to a wound to stop bleeding. All of this is going to be used in addition to what you already have as well. So I've almost always got a belt on me. I've got a pack with straps. I've got cordage. I've got additional cloth. All of those things are things that you can use in a emergency situation to, you know, help yourself, whether that's fashioning an additional tourniquet if needed, applying pressure with a belt, whatever that looks like. So don't think that this is all you've got in an emergency scenario. You have to use your training and your knowledge in order to, you know, help yourself get out of there alive. Next is some Dermabond. So this kind of falls into the category of making you more comfortable while you're out there rather than surviving until you can get help. Dermabond is a specially formulated skin glue. It's very similar to super glue or something like that. But for minor to like moderate lacerations or cuts, this is going to be a really good option to help seal those up. Of course, you want to get it cleaned out, but sealing it up at least until you can get, you know, back to the car or something may be necessary. Or on really minor stuff, you can just kind of put this on there to seal it up to keep it from getting open and getting infected. Next thing is going to be my little med kit here. So not a whole lot here. I've got a couple Benadryl, a couple Tylenol. So Benadryl is primarily for anaphylaxis. I'm not allergic to anything, but especially if you were to get into a yellow jacket's nest or something like that, where there is more risk of a pretty serious reaction, some Benadryl can go a long way in helping to prevent that, or at least to stave it off until you can get help, get out, or get someone that can, you know, be there to rescue you. Also in here is some Tylenol for pain. Again, this goes with self-rescue. If you sprain your ankle, get hurt, you need to be able to get yourself out, or at least to somewhere where someone else can access you. Some pain relief goes a long way. Another thing to keep in mind is maybe even picking up a stronger pain medication. You know, if you broke your leg and you had to get somewhere, or broke your ankle, granted, you know, there's some level at which you're no longer going to be mobile and you're going to be reliant on getting help, but being able to treat that pain to give yourself a little more mobility is going to be important. Granted, with those stronger pain medications, make sure you know how they're going to affect you. What you really don't want to do is take something that's going to make your situation worse, whether that's confusion, drowsiness, mental fog, anything like that. Also in here are some Band-Aids. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then in the back here, I've got some Leuko tape. So that's an adhesive, like orthopedic tape. I've got probably 4 feet of that in here, mainly for blisters. So that's the best thing I've found for treating blisters or hot spots. Usually if I stick a piece of Leuko tape over it, do good to kind of prep and clean the area beforehand, that'll stay on there 3 to 4 days for me, which is usually longer than I end up hunting for most of the time anyway. But just applying that over a blister, just straight on there, is going to protect that skin from any further abrasion. But you can also use it, you know, to secure a pad or Band-Aid or really whatever you need. Last thing in my first aid kit here is just an insect repellent wipe. That's really because this is the best place I have to put it. It kind of fits in better here than it does anywhere else in my pack. And when bugs are really bad, this can be, you know, borderline first aid. Granted, I hunt with out of a bivy sack usually, so bugs aren't as big of a worry for me. But in the spring, ticks are bad, so it's a very handy thing to have there as well. So that's kind of my first aid kit. That's everything that I carry. Again, make sure you have a way to call for help. Garmin inReach, or, you know, there's a Spot, some other satellite communicators, or at least an iPhone with satellite connectivity if you're going to be somewhere outside of phone service. If you've got phone service and you've got a phone, then, you know, that should do the trick. But having a backup to something so essential is pretty important as well. So I always carry an inReach in addition to my phone with satellite texting. So yeah, that's everything in this kit. Again, I'm right at 7.5 ounces here. I have the capability to treat some pretty serious stuff. Ultimately, your training and knowledge base is going to be the most important thing. You're not going to carry a boot or a set of crutches or anything like that. You know, if you break your ankle or leg, you know, you're going to have to know how to fashion a splint or how to contact someone that can either give you that information or get to you to help you to self-rescue. But this is mostly stuff designed to either increase the amount of time you have until help arrives, or to allow yourself to be able to self-rescue. So that's my kit. That's what I carry. You know, this is for me here in the East, where I'm 3 to 5 miles from the car. If I was in Alaska or somewhere extremely remote, I'd definitely take a more robust kit. But this is what works for me. I hope I never have to use it, but 7.5 ounces isn't too bad a penalty for the life-saving measures that are here.